Conceive, believe, achieve.
This is former UFC middleweight champion of the world, Michael Bisping.
Paddy the Baddy here. You're listening to Combat Sports UK.
And you're watching Combat Sports UK.
Hi everybody, welcome back to a very special edition of the Combat Sports UK MMA podcast. As you can see, I am joined by the Octagon Oracle himself. Nathan Shields is back in action. How are you, sir?
I'm all good, mate. All good. Glad to be back.
Amazing. Good to have you back in action, mate. And I am joined also by our friend from across the shore over there in Canada. Probably sick of the sound of my voice right now. Jonathan Bogolowski, how are you, sir?
Good. Yeah, too much talking from you. Kidding.
Nathan knows that.
Week in, week out.
How do you do it?
I do not know. This is not really Lucas saying this.
Yeah, to be fair, that boxing party where he was actually full on having a beer in that one that we did together. So, as you probably are aware, this year is a very special year for the UFC. It shares a birthday with me, funnily enough. I'm also celebrating my birthday on Saturday. I am not 30 years old. I'm a couple of years older than that. But yeah, 30 years ago today in Denver, the UFC was born. And what we're going to do here today is just go through our favorite fight from that 30-year era and our favorite fighters. So we're going to kick off with our favorite fights. We're going to go 5-3, and then we're going to hear a bit more detail of everyone's top two. So, Octagon Oracle, I will let you kick us off with your fight at number 5.
Okay. So before I go into my lists and who my favourites are, I was not a UFC fan right from the off. I never pretend to be. I was a little bit of a late bloomer around sort of the Michael Bisping era. That was kind of what drew my attention from a British perspective, to someone to really get behind. So for me, favourite fighters and favourite fights are going to be a little bit more recent than maybe some others that you guys may have chucked in. But at number 5, one that stood out for me was Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I mean, the first fight there, Weili was sort of just coming into her own and we were starting to see who she was. And then we, obviously JJ's been around for a long time and we've seen her in a number of wars. And that one there was, one for the history books for sure. I mean, it's probably not the most popular insofar as it's not one that you look back and you go, that was a standout fight. But this was kind of sprung on me because I wasn't meant to be on this pod. So I've just jumped on last minute. And that is one that kind of jumped out to me to say, it was worthy of a note at number 5.
Yeah, you've done very well there. You've done very well. That's the Klingon fight where Joanna Jędrzejczyk turned into a Klingon with her forehead, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
John,
something was growing out of there.
You're number 5. You're number 5. Are all your fights and fighters Canadian, by the way, or is there a mix? If we just go all British and you go all Canadian, we'll be fine.
I only have one Canadian fighter.
Okay.
But they're number 2, so I'm saving later.
I wonder who that could be.
Might surprise you actually. So just like Nathan, I got into UFC a bit later. I've been kind of watching the end of the Anderson Silva era, and then he broke his leg, and then I kind of took a step back. I'm like, oh, it's a little gruesome. But now I love watching that. So my top fights are more recent as well. I've been in the GSP era. I'm from Montreal, so he was huge in Montreal. And so every corner you run around, you heard GSP. So saying that, my 5th fight of all time is Gaethje versus Chandler. Ooh. So something very recent, but lightweights can't go wrong. Gaethje, no boring fights. Chandler, since UFC, no boring fights. I just remember watching that fight, and there was 2 minutes left in the first round, and I watched and I saw the clock. I'm like, there's still 2 minutes left. It felt like 3 rounds already passed by. I thought we were in the 3rd round, minute left. There's so much action. The boys just agreed to stand against each other, face to face, and just throw haymakers.
Yep.
That's an absolute banger. And very timely as well, as we're going back to MSG this weekend. So for me at number 5, well, I mean, I got into UFC later than you guys. So I picked up a UFC 200 exactly. I'd kind of heard about Connor and all this kind of stuff. I played the video games when I was like, I don't know what age, must have been 12 or 13, the old UFC Undisputed. And actually that comes back in my top fighters. But then I thought, yeah, you know what? I've just moved back from living in Dubai, and I was like, oh, you know what? I've got 2 months free. I'm just going to watch some UFC. I'm going to get into this, and then boom, UFC 200. So not a bad card to join in on. So my fight in at number 5, Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier, headlined the UFC fight night not so long ago. I believe it was an Apex fight night back during COVID. Just a ridiculous fight. Just a ridiculous fight. I mean, Hooker since then has been a bit up and down, and Poirier, as we know, has kind of gone on to superstardom. So on that note, we're going to flip back to John for number 4. What is your number 4, John?
Number 4 was for the middleweight interim championship. Israel Adesanya versus Kevin Gastelum.
Okay, yeah.
That was, I think, Izzy's best fight in terms of 5 rounds, where he didn't finish somebody. Gastelum with the Mexican heart kept going. Izzy getting a 10-8 in the last round, and he's just a mix of Izzy striking, the elbows, the kicks, a little bit of grappling, the grappling sequence where he went for a triangle, when they're too slippery, he got out. So it was.
I'm ready to die for this. That's what he was saying.
Yes, I'm ready for that at this moment. Before going to round 5 and got a 10-8. So yeah, that's my number 4.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nathan.
I mean, aside from the Alex Pereira fights, I think that's the one that stands out in Izzy's career to date. I think that's, probably the greatest fight that we've probably seen him in. So yeah, you can see why that one's up there. I'm going to quickly skip through my number 4 because it's already been mentioned. So my number 4 is Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler at MSG. As John said there, I mean, that fight was just unbelievable. I mean, it's interesting because it's one of those fights which further down the line will be talked about in the same way that we talk about some of the other fights that I won't name some because we might go on to list them down here. But some of the great fights from maybe a little bit further back in time, the early days, if you like. So I think this is going to be one of those that, as history goes on, we'll look back when Chandler, Gaethje, Poirier, all these guys retire. We'll look at some of these fights and say they were at all-time classics, not just in the moment classics. Agreed. That was definitely one of them.
Couldn't agree more. My number 4 is from the 3rd pay-per-view card I ever watched, and that is Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz 2. Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz 2. I just remember the hype of him getting choked out, everything going into it, the water bottles flying everywhere. God, what a press conference that was. Just an unbelievable fight, Go watch it.
Yeah, 2 shit talkers.
Exactly. Go watch it. It's incredible. Oracle, back to you for number 3. What's coming in at number 3 for you?
I was actually there was one which I've just left out of here, but an honourable mention kind of goes to Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, mainly because I couldn't decide which one of those fighters I wanted to chuck in there. But one that I've chosen to put in instead is Jon Jones against Gustafsson, the first fight, obviously. There. I mean, mainly because even to date, coming towards the end of his reign as light heavyweight king, Jon Jones had, a couple of contentious, close decisions where he looked to have maybe lost a step. The Dominic Reyes fights, that kind of ilk, that kind of area just seemed to have lost interest a little bit. But when the Gus fight came around, that is still to date the closest we've ever seen anybody push Jon Jones, in my opinion. That is the fight that prime Jon Jones, right at the top of his game, kind of met his match in Gus on that night. With the fact that he's continued to have such a career that's gone on and spanned on so long, and he still keeps that, unbeaten record in check. There's obviously, it should just be wins the whole way through, but obviously John's had his problems over the years, and certain things have affected certain result outcomes, let's say. But the guy's undefeated in the octagon, and this was the one where it could have very easily gone the other way.
Great choice.
And he allegedly didn't train for that fight.
Does he train for any fight? Go, John. Number 3.
Number three, well, it was mentioned already, right, Nathan?
Mhm.
To me, it's the greatest women fight of all time. Joanna versus Wei Lee. The reason I have it higher is just because it was a 5 rounder for the belt. Joanna was such a boogeyman. Wei Lee was this like kind of up and comer, we could say that, because we didn't see her fight big names, and then she got the belt and she was defending it. And that fight would not end. It was back and forth. I still don't know who won. Every time I rewatch it, um, Joanna had an alien growing out of her forehead. Both women were just like strike for strike going at it, and until like from the very first bell, the first round, to the last bell, the fifth round, nonstop action. And I can't think of another fight that's for 5 rounds went that for that amount of tit for tat. So that's my number three.
Connor and Diaz too, by the way. So my number three was my number three is
Maybe.
probably the fight that made me fall in love with the beauty that is the UFC. And that is Connor. The Connor comes back in the list for me versus Eddie Alvarez. Why did I fall in love with it? Because it was like watching art. The way Connor performed, went for the second belt. It was literally like there was, some people say, oh, MMA is too violent and this and that. That fight was just like watching art. It was just beautiful to watch his movement, the way he slipped the shots he hit on Eddie. Incredible for me. Absolutely gorgeous. And it takes us nicely into now our top twos. So John, we'll fire back to you. We'll go reverse order again. John, what's at number two for you?
So here's my Canadian in my pick, but it's Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
I think that was just a nasty fight. Just both of them looked beat up. Lawler with his half lip hanging up, hanging down, the other lip hanging, I don't know where it was. And just the pure brutality, the stare down between round 4 and 5.
Oh, yeah.
They were just staring each other down. Robbie spitting blood, and I was like, if you like violence, that is the fight to watch.
What a way to sound it out. Nathan, number two. What have we got?
So number two for me carries a little bit of British bias, but at the end of the day, there's one man in British MMA that has kind of, carried the torch for us, and that was Michael Bisping. And his fight with Anderson Silva, that knee that basically took his head off, and to come back from that, depending who you ask, there'll be many people who generally aren't fans of Mike that would say he lost that fight. Others would argue that he did enough to win it. Which side of the fence you sit on, for me, is kind of irrelevant in that fight, because this was still Anderson Silva, and not the Anderson Silva that maybe we saw in there with Izzy and some other guys later on. This was still an Anderson Silva that was absolutely deadly. And for Mike to just come back from that and to just clear his head and just go, okay, let's go. And to take that knee, go back to his corner, and then come out and fucking win the next round was just, for me, just insane. It was a statement of everything that he is and stands for. And that I'm not going to lie, was one of the things that I dabbled in and out, and I'd seen little bits here and there, and I started following Mike, and I'd seen him win, lose, win. That for me is still a better win than the Luke Rockhold win, just because of who Anderson Silva is and what he faced in that fight. So for me, Bisping Anderson Silva comes in at number two.
Especially getting that win in the UK.
Yeah.
Yep.
What a choice.
Massive.
Yeah. No one was going to beat him there.
So my number two comes from another UFC anniversary show. I believe this was the 25th anniversary show when they went back to Denver, and it was I believe it was main event at the time, but it was Yair Rodriguez and the Korean Zombie. I've never seen a fight quite like that. Yeah, exactly. I've never seen a fight. For the audio listeners, Nathan just threw a back elbow. I've never seen a fight quite like that, where it was so good throughout, and Korean Zombie was quite clearly winging it, and he just said, "Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to go do zombie things, run at him." And then Rodriguez, with seconds to
Out
go,
of
just comes
nowhere.
out of nowhere with his elbow coming from absolute nowhere. And I remember literally jumping off my sofa. This is the only time it's ever happened. Jumped off my sofa, screaming, and I had the neighbors come round and knock on my door. And they were like, "Everything all right in here?" And I was like, "Watch this." They were just like, "What the hell?" So yeah, that's my number two, just because it was just my reaction, because I'm just thinking, yeah, Kareem, like zombie, you win, just relax, and then boom, out of nowhere. So go, Nathan.
To date, that's still the only fight that I've ever seen where I've watched 3 or 4 replays in the moment and still didn't know what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't make sense, did it? It didn't make sense.
Crazy finish. Crazy
How
finish.
The shots
did
you
you
don't see.
find that shot?
Yeah, exactly. So number one for our top favorite fights. Honestly, I have no idea where either of you's going to go with this one. I don't think you're ever going to guess what mine's going to be. So Nathan, we'll start with you. What was your number one favorite fight?
Well, again, my number one favorite fight ever of all time that I have seen has already been mentioned. And I'd love to know how John's got it lower down the list. And I can't wait to see what he's put in front of it, because for me, Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald is one of those fights where you either fall in love with this sport or you realise it's too violent for you. There's no middle ground. Nobody watches that and sits on the fence. That for me was, like you said, just to see the state of the two of them when they came for that face-off. You know, noses, chins, eyelids, everything that wasn't supposed to be hanging off the faces was hanging off, and just the back and forwards and the near finishes and just the absolute warfare of that fight. I mean, those two guys left absolutely everything in there, and I don't think there's another fight that I can think of that comes even remotely close to what those two guys did on that night, because I think any other fighter, any other night, that doesn't go the distance. It was just a crazy fight between two absolute psychos. Is the only way I can put it.
Psycho. Well, Rory was never the same after that. And
No, it's incredible to think that either of them were able to even walk out of that octagon at the end of that. So it's not surprising, you know, what the kind of run that Rory went on following that. But it just shows what these guys put on the line for us so that we can watch this sport, and you know what I mean. They do it all for our entertainment.
Showed violence and a lot of heart. That's like you saw, like pure athleticism and the will of the person just to get the taste of the gold.
Yeah, and let's be honest, this was Robbie Lawler. This was
ruthless
Robbie Lawler, not the Robbie Lawler that a lot of fans see today. You know, this was the guy. This was the guy. So crazy fight. That for me is number one, and I couldn't even find an argument for anything else to take its place.
We're about to hear two. Let's go, John.
We are.
What have you got?
We are.
What have you got?
Well, yeah, mine's gonna go a bit from left field. You guys might be a little bit surprised, but my number one fight is Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar for the Ultimate Season Finale 1, because I think that's when UFC took a big step to the next fandom. Was it the most skilled fight? No. Was it the greatest fighters of all time? No. But we just spoke about heart. It just showed two men that wanted to get the job in the UFC and brought everything out they could. If you see pictures of them after the fight, they look messed up. There's sweat, blood. It looks like they got punched 1,000,000 times. And it just showed there's a step to the UFC, especially after you watch a whole season of the Ultimate Fighter show, and you got to these two people, Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar, and they just threw it down. It was.
I think having watched those fights back, because the reason I've kind of put the fights that I've got in the order that I've got is because they don't have the same feel watching them back, even, you know, watching them now, to what actually happened live in the moment. But you're absolutely right. Without that fight, in my opinion, none of the fights that we've talked about to date happen. because that
Yes.
was a pivotal point for the UFC, and that's kind of what sprung them into the entity that they are today. So, absolutely deserves a place on the list.
That's the reason I have it as number one. I think it took a big step. It's just like how when UFC came back in the pandemic and you saw another boom for UFC fans watching.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the first time people paid attention to UFC, and I was like, wow, this is violence, fighting, everything you want in a sport, and just two men bring
Mm-hmm.
all their heart out. And the best part of it is they both got a contract at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely tremendous choices there. You kind of make mine look a little bit little and look a little bit insignificant, but my favorite fight comes. This was the fight where, yeah, I fell in love with the sport with the Conor Alvarez fight. But this is the fight where I knew and I realized what it was all about. And this is Duho Choi and Cub Swanson, a UFC 206. My goodness, what a fight. Back and forth. They're both just rocking each other with every single shot. Neither of them have been the same since. Duho Choi had to go off and do military service. That's how mad this fight was.
For something easier.
Yeah, for something a bit easier. I mean, just
it's like a holiday for him after that.
yeah. I mean, just incredible. It had literally everything. A decision where you didn't know how it was going to go. Back and forth with the striking. The grappling barely lasted a couple of seconds, and they both just kind of threw each other off each other and said, "No, we're gonna fight this out." I mean, just incredible. And I remember the crowd absolutely lapped up, and I was just like, "Whoa, this is amazing! Like this is incredible." So that's my number one. So I'll take us swiftly to fighters. Number five, fighters. I'm going to kick off my number five. The only reason he's at my number five is because he's the only reason I ever heard of the UFC, because somebody gave me a video game back in the day and I liked his shorts and I liked his hair. Chuck Liddell. That's it. I used to just play the game, knock people out as Chuck Liddell. And since then, I've watched all of his highlights. I've watched all of his fights back, and he's just an absolute legend, and I absolutely love the guy. So, Nathan, who's in it? Your number five? Top five favorite fighters?
At number five, I'm going to put the notorious Conor McGregor, and Conor will sit in at number five. And when I talk about Conor, I'm not talking about today's Conor. I'm talking about the notorious Conor McGregor, the champ. You know that, because it doesn't matter if you're a fan now or if you're not, if you like what he gets up to, or whether you don't, whether you agree with what he says or whether you don't. Conor McGregor changed the sport forever. Mm-hmm. He reached heights and showed people that there's different heights that you can reach in this game. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Taylor. That fight with Eddie Alvarez was just artwork. It was absolutely perfect. Yeah. It was just perfection. It was just one guy absolutely piecing the other guy up for fun, at will, with one hand behind his back, literally at times. It was just beautiful. And then to just take Aldo out the way that he did, it was one of those. Now Conor talks a lot, and is at a point in his career where he's not able to back it up. But back then, whatever Conor said, he backed up, and that everybody jumped on that train. And I don't care what anybody says. I could sit here and hold my hands up and say I didn't watch UFC 1 right from the off. I've gone back and watched stuff since, but I've not been here since day dot. I've not always followed it. I've not known all the fighters over time, and I can't tell you some of the greatest fights from way back when. What I can say is this: when you look at Conor McGregor and you look at what he's kind of done since he came in, he has just reached different heights. He's done it in a different way. The first champ. You can't argue with it. He's just, for me, he has to be on your list whether you like him or not. Nowadays, he's right up there. He sits at number 5 for me.
Good pick. I'll pick somebody who beat Aldo twice, actually. And I think he had an incredible run until he met one guy named Volkanovski. And for me, number 5 is Max Holloway. I think he had a crazy 14-fight winning streak at featherweight. His kryptonite is just lightweight and Volkanovski. He cannot just move up a weight class. But the featherweight division, he dominated every single guy except Volk.
Mm-hmm.
Since he lost to Connor by decision, he went on a crazy winning streak.
Yeah.
He stepped up to fight Khabib, but then Bisping said he didn't look well, and then they had to look into him. And I'm so glad Topuria is not fighting Holloway, so we could see fresh opponents for Volkanovski and February. So Holloway, and I didn't even mention the significant strikes. He is leading by over 1,000, I believe.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
No one even close. The second person, I believe, is Joanna, who is retired, and I can't remember who's the other people, but they're so far off.
Yeah.
Yeah, super far off. Number 4 for me. Already mentioned him. It's Korean Zombie. Why? Just because Korean Zombie like comes out to that tune. It's just iconic. That when he fought Max over in Singapore, it just doesn't get better than that. You know, like that way to go out with that song, crowd singing it as he was coming in. Unbelievable guy. Seems super humble and like a genuinely good guy off the mats as well. And I remember seeing a little promo where he was playing around with his baby and stuff on the mats. And I was like, this is just such a dude. And then he just absolutely goes out and just murks people for fun. So yeah, Korean Zombies at my number 4. Yeah, I think that's a good choice. I think that's a solid choice. Nathan, next, number 4. Who you got?
Number 4 for me is the Spider. I'm going to put Anderson Silva at number 4, just because, Anderson Silva came and did something again that we'd never really seen. This was a guy that came in with a huge reputation and just fought in a way that we'd not really ever seen anybody fight before. This was a guy that was throwing shapes like we'd never seen. So purely based on that, for me, the resume speaks for itself. The accomplishments speak for themselves. But yeah, Anderson Silva has to be, in my opinion, on everybody's top 5 list. So I better see him in there, guys, at some point.
He is in my top 5, but not as low as yours. Number 4 for me, it's a bit biased because I really like this guy, is Israel Adesanya. More like contender Adesanya, because then that's when he had his striking so profound. He was finishing guys. He was dominating people. Obviously, when you get the belt, there's more tougher competition. People are more hungry to get that. But Izzy, in terms of striking, was next level. Was like when Silva got to the UFC. There was a next level when Izzy got to the UFC, and there's another level of striking with creativeness and just beautiful striking. Like I said, like he was in one of my top 5 most memorable fights. The way he finished Whitaker to get undisputed was also amazing. And if you talk about like how you mentioned Connor and how you mentioned Korean Zombie, you want someone who's an icon, and people know who Israel Adesanya is, even the casuals.
Yeah, it's true. He's properly crossed over now, isn't he? He's even got a movie or something as well. That's just come out.
Yeah.
We're getting onto the home stretch. Number 3 for me is the great. You alluded to him earlier, Alexander Volkanovski. I just think from the moment I heard him on Bisping's podcast, I think not long after he started to get top 10, and he had these bright pink headphones on, and he was just giving it some Australian banter. I was like, "You're an absolute legend." And then he backed it up in his fights. And what I love about Volkanovski is he has evolved so much since his debut, through the Aldo fight. He fought everybody. He fought everybody in that division before getting that shot at Max. And then, even though I don't know where I'd sit with those first 2 Max fights, to be honest. But the third one, to go and do that in the third fight to Max bloody Holloway, after what he's been doing to people, you just don't do that. Like, that just doesn't happen. Obviously he came up short against Islam recently, but then you get all of these memes that have come out afterwards, right? Like, oh, somebody's dropped out the John Jones one, right? And you got the Volt coming down. I just thought the guy's just a legend. He's just a proper sound guy, properly family man. He's in it for a good time, not a long time. And I just can't wait to
Mhm.
see whenever he comes to fight the Ortega fight, where his head's going
Almost got
pink and he's
choked
stuck in
out.
the triangle. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And then what he did to Yair Rodriguez, where he just said, "No, you know what? I'm done with this now,"
One-sided.
Yeah.
and then just tore him inside out. Yeah, that's why
Mhm.
Volk Alexander the Great is at my number 3.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Volk and Max are both absolute studs, and they ride up there. Don't disagree with anything you guys have said. My number 3 is Chuck Liddell, the Iceman. Chuck for me was the first MMA fighter that I ever heard of. If I'm being completely honest,
Same.
I had Chuck Liddell as my background on on all sorts of MySpace or whatever it was at the time. Bebo or something, some shit like that, and he was on there as the backing because I turned on and someone mentioned it and I watched some highlights and I thought, Jesus Christ, I think I'll pay attention to this guy. And I never watched a sport unless he was fighting. And
Yeah.
after he kind of went off, I kind of dipped right back out again, and then came back in at a later date. But he was my introduction into MMA, if you like. So Chuck Liddell sits at 3.
Amazing. Great pick.
That's a good pick. Yeah, the iconic Mohawk as well. My number 3, John Bones Jones. I started watching him when he first came to the UFC, and just dominant from the start. Nobody had an answer to him. His first fights, it was either he finished or nobody had an answer to him until Gus came in and did his best, frankly, and then still came up short. His rivalry with DC, legendary. Just, both men just hated each other, and
It was amazing.
especially now, yeah, especially now,
Great fun.
yeah, especially now moving to heavyweight and becoming a 2-time weight division champion, which he's been saying he's was going to do it. Yeah, the reason he's just lower on my list is because he got bored in light heavyweight and got some close decisions versus Reyes, Santos. So if he dominated, then he would have been way higher. But yeah.
So, gents, that brings us to our top 2 favorite fighters of all time. I'm very curious to see what you guys have come up with. We had some absolute legends so far. Straight in at number 2 for me is the human highlight reel, Justin Gaethje. Need I say any more? The dude is an absolute human highlight reel. Every single fight he has is incredible. And when I got tickets to this show just behind me, I will be very, very honest. I was more excited to see Justin Gaethje than I was anything else on that card. It was like, I honestly felt like I was going to watch like Messi in his prime or something like that for a little football reference, right? Like I was just so hyped to go and see this guy fight just because of how exciting he is. The crap he does in the octagon, the backflip off the top and all that kind of thing. And to be fair, like out of all of them, I probably saw his most boring fight against Khabib. Like it was a lot more technical and a lot different, but man, what a guy. He comes in at my number 2 just for being an absolute warrior, just for being phenomenal. He doesn't really talk a whole lot of trash, but he's very, very to the point when he does, and he's just always in great fights, every single time. So that's my number 2. Nathan, who have you got? Who's your pick?
My number 2 is Justin the highlight reel Gaethje.
Let's go.
For me, look, when you're putting these lists together, favorite fights are maybe one thing, but when you're talking about favorite fighters, it's not necessarily skill for skill. I mean, John obviously mentioned Jon Jones there. I think everybody will, put their hand on heart and saying Jon Jones is probably the greatest to ever do it. It's not. I'm not saying anything new there that no one's ever heard before. And you can talk about certain fighters and certain skill sets and everything else, but these lists are always a bit personal. And just for me, a bit like you've said there, is Justin Gaethje the most well-rounded fighter we've ever seen? No. Is he the most tactically astute fighter we've ever seen? No. But you are guaranteed entertainment with Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
For me, there's no Justin Gaethje fight I will ever miss. If I see Justin Gaethje's name on a fight, it doesn't matter who's in the opposite side of the octagon. makes no difference whatsoever because I will tune in solely to see Justin Gaethje. So for that reason, Gaethje sits at 2.
Nice. Come on, John. It's gotta be Gaethje.
Well, speaking of personal preferences, mine has to be George St. Pierre at number 2.
Okay, yeah.
But we all knew that was coming at some point.
So, like Bisping for you guys, me, GSP for Canada was amazing. Who beat GSP, by the way? So who beat Bisping, by the way?
No, that didn't happen. I know what you're talking about.
Taylor, just out of interest, Taylor, you can throw people out of this meeting, can't you? Because I would recommend we do it now.
Yeah, where's that button? Right, where's that button?
Yeah.
You just lost all credibility. No, go ahead, man.
Well, back in 2017, we became at MSG a 2-time champion. Like John Jones came off a 3-year layoff, came back and beat Bisping, who looked unbeatable as well. He beat Rockhold on short notice, then defended his title against Dan Henderson. And he
with one eye.
with one eye, especially with one
broken
eye.
Ribs.
So which makes the win even more impressive. Because Bisping's all heart. He has 110% heart inside of him. And GSP, although his fights weren't the best, like Gaethje and like strike for strike, stuff like that, it was very technical. He knew how to beat guys. It was one-sided. You knew in a GSP fight, you knew GSP was going to win. And just the fact coming from Montreal and from Canada, GSP is the biggest name. He would train at our local gym at the YMCA. I don't know if you guys have that in the UK. He would train there. You'd meet up. He would talk to everybody. Super nice. I went clubbing one time. The guy was just there.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, he was just like, "Hi, I'm George," and like we all knew who you were. Who you
Were
were.
you intoxicated?
Yeah.
You're intoxicated.
And like he's an icon, so that's why number 2 for me.
Amazing, man. What a pick.
Yeah, I mean, George. Everyone can say George is one of the greatest to ever do it. George for me missed out on my list, so it gives away a little bit of where number 1's potentially going. It's not George. George is not on my list. The same way that Mighty Mouse is not on this list, and the reason for that is because phenomenal fighters, not the most fan-friendly style, but you can't take away from the skill set that those guys possess. That those two there that I've mentioned there, Demetrius Johnson, GSP, those kind of fighters, right up there is the best to ever do it.
Right.
Yeah,
well, I had to go with him since.
Oh no,
of course,
you can't.
Canada.
George is the man.
And if we didn't kick you off, the Canadian government probably would have. So it's good. It's good. So it brings us to the final step in our little journey here of our top 5 favorite fighters. Mine's been mentioned before by one of you gents. It's Max Blessed Holloway. The guy for me, he's somebody who, from when I was watching the UFC, like when I got into the UFC around UFC 200, he was just coming into that contendership prime. He got at UFC 206, what we just mentioned before with a Cub Swanson Duo Choi fight. That's where he got his big step and won the interim belt because obviously Conor was doing what Conor was doing. He won the interim belt against Anthony Pettis. And from then on, I just love that. I just love that guy's style. I love the way he presents himself as well. Like him and Daniel Cormier going back and forth. It's just one of my favorite things I think I've ever seen at a press conference. It was just so fun and just so cool. The way he stepped up, like you mentioned, with Khabib, willing to do it, looked like an absolute. He just didn't look good. He didn't look good, but he was still willing to go in there and do it. And then you talk about the fights. You talk about him going toe to toe with Jose Aldo and just beating the brakes off of him.
Twice.
Twice exactly. Which is not. It's not something that people do. And I think Jose Aldo's recent form since then has proved that the McGregor knockout didn't finish him, so to speak.
Yeah.
I find that argument a little bit irrelevant when it comes to the Max fight. Maybe there was a little bit of it, but Max was just too good for him. Just too good for him. And then you look at all of his title defenses, what he did to Brian Ortega. What he did to Brian Ortega should have been a crime. Like, the dude, he just completely ended him. The dude hasn't been the same since. He can only fight once. once a year since then. I mean, he just had him. That's it. You know, you can't do that.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
go on,
a couple
Nathan.
of those performances, the Calvin Cater performance
Calvin
and
Cater was
That's where I was
and
going
the
next.
Ortega fights. I mean, when you're starting to show your opponents, like in the Ortega fight, how to defend from his own shots, and when you're throwing punches without looking, and you're bobbing and you're weaving, and
Flip.
you're not even looking at your opponent, it just shows the level of Max has always been on. You know,
And
I
how you-
think
And how you
Go on, John.
50-42 a guy
Mm.
in a fight that's all 10-8 rounds, 10-7s, like
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think the only disappointing thing with Max, unfortunately, is that maybe he's taken a bit of a turn in this way, because obviously he just laid out the Korean Zombie, but Max has just always missed that bit of power, hasn't he? That just has always stopped him from kind of going to that next level. But everybody loves Max Holloway. I mean,
But-
Max is just phenomenal. For me, I think had he not run into Alexander Volkanovski, Max would still be just dominating that division and would be looking at, potentially the greatest featherweight of all time.
yeah,
I think
easily.
that would be a real conversation, and probably still is.
which proves it
Yeah.
because he still beats all the contenders, beats Cater, Allen, Korean
Mhm.
Zombie.
And
Sure.
you can make an argument that he won the first two Volk fights.
Yeah.
I personally gave Volk the first fight, but I thought Max actually won the second one.
Yes. Agreed.
So, obviously the third one, Volk put the nail in that coffin, but there's an argument there.
ignore it, though.
Max has been right there and deserves all the credit in the world.
And that is why he's my number one. He's at my number one spot.
Mhm.
You know, there's those top two for me are two fighters I'm never ever gonna miss one of their fights. Never. I'm just not gonna do it. Just not gonna do it. If I can see Max Holloway in person before he retires, then that'll be a dream come true for me. So let's go.
Mhm.
Nathan, who have you got? Who have you got at number one?
It won't be any surprise to anybody, this one, but conceive, believe, achieve. Shut the fuck up. For the reason I stated earlier, Michael Bisping is not the most talented mixed martial artist that we've ever seen, and he's far from it, and he would hold his hands up to that himself. A well-rounded fighter, yes, but heart, determination, and just pure grit is everything that he's about. He's carried the flag. The reason, Leon probably won't appreciate this, but the half of the reason that Leon Edwards is champion of the world is because Mike's been there and done it and shown that we can do it. Guys from this shore can. A small guy from a small town in England where mixed martial arts wasn't really a thing, having to travel up and down the country, over in the States, for example, mixed martial arts is far bigger than it is or ever was over in the UK. Even now, to go to a mixed martial arts gym, it's not like there's one in every town. You're not fighting for, you can go here, there, everywhere. There's a few scattered about. And yes, it's growing continually, but the big part of why that's growing is because Mike won that belt and got people into mixed martial arts that in the UK that had never even heard of the UFC, never had heard of mixed martial arts. So, like I said, for me, my own journey at the UFC, I dabbled in with Chuck to start off with, but it was when Mike jumped on the scene that I really got into it. And, I followed his journey through the wins, the losses, getting up there in title contention and then falling off and just getting towards that back end of the career, and then to win the belt against Rockhold and get that victory back over Henderson. There's the win there with Anderson Silva. And there's some good names on that resume as well. It's an underrated resume when you look at it. There's some wins and some very, very close contentious, even losses on there to some big, big names. He's been in there with the who's who in mixed martial arts. And yes, he got flatlined by Dan Henderson. He got that one back. He lost to George. But, he's openly said and made no excuses that George was the better man on the night. But he did have his issues coming into that. He did have the one eye. Even George has admitted on Mike's podcast that he knew that he only had the one working eye, and kind of, worked the fight to his benefit. And why wouldn't he? All's fair in love and war and all that sort of stuff. But for me, Bisping takes the number one spot.
And Bisping did it clean in the non-clean era before USADA came in and everyone's bodies started to go. He did it. He did it. He did it in the clean era. So that's really something to be noted. Yeah, I mean, just from another British perspective, I mean, what a guy! What an absolute guy! It's one of those. I came right at the end of that era, so obviously, I saw the Henderson fight, and that was the only. Oh no, that and the GSP fight were the only fights I saw kind of live, like in time. And yeah, I just remember thinking what an icon this guy was, and then like finding out about his story and going back and watching his fights was, yeah, I really loved that.
Like I watched him on the Ultimate Fighter, and it was just great because you've got all these Americans or Canadians or whatever, they're all in there, and they're all in the tough house. And then you've got this gobshite from Manchester. Well, clear the road, but it's close enough. And
yeah,
just the comedy factor, the sarcasm, it's just different because we live a different style of life over here. And it was nice to see that get thrown in. And, it was just good to see because he just represented. And he would say poorly, but, it was a young fighter trying to make something. So,
yeah,
Mike for me sits at number one.
Amazing. So, John, it can't be GSP. So, where are we going? There's no other Canadian fighters really left that could be on this list. So, come on, where are we going?
Well, I guess my list's kind of boring now that I think about it, but I grew up watching him. He's the person who got me into the UFC, and it's Anderson Silva. It's more of a boring pick, but
not all.
And well, I feel like more people have kind of obvious pick, I would say, but I think if you look up just what he's done, you would always like how you said to Gaethje and Holloway. You tune into their fights today. You were tuning into Silva's fights.
Mm-hmm.
All the casuals knew who he was. Oh, Silva's fighting this Saturday. You'd always watch. We talked about Izzy lapping the division. Silva did that. He was going to fight non-title bites at light heavyweight in between to get a middleweight contender. He was finishing. He had 10 defenses and he had 8 finishes. Who finishes 8 of their championship fights?
Yeah,
that's nuts to do. And the only 2 he didn't finish were Brazilians. He just wanted to go easy on his fellow countrymen. So
I think like you said though, John, the fact that Anderson Silva is an obvious pick, and you're right, Anderson's an obvious pick for number one, but that kind of just backs up your point. At the end of the day, the fact that you can talk about Anderson Silva as being an obvious number one mixed martial artist or UFC fighter ever, so just it labels it there. Just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's wrong. Anderson Silva's right up there, and no one can make an argument for him not being top of that list.
Yeah,
I certainly can't argue it.
Only wish he retired earlier, left UFC earlier, because then that's how some people would remember the end Taylor's career. But
didn't box Jake Paul.
Yeah, and we ignore that part. That didn't happen. Just like how GSP didn't win against.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're liable to cut things out. Yeah. Never happened.
But
yeah,
I think you can't go wrong with Silva. If you're a fan today, you go back to his fights, you still be fun. You still watch it.
Yeah.
Even like one of the best comebacks was just Chael Sonnen. Like he was getting dominated. It was going to be a 5-round unanimous decision, getting out wrestled by Chael Sonnen, and then out of nowhere, just puts on a triangle, gets a tap. Like he just found the way to finish.
I think the thing with Anderson as well is when you look back and, when we talk about the Stephan Bonner fights and we talk about that kind of beginning era, if you like, when mixed martial arts was kind of being born, and the UFC was right at its very beginning, if you like. And then we talk about Chuck Liddell's and those kind of people. We can watch back and we can watch those fights, and they're fun, entertaining fights because they're competitive, because, both fighters are on a very similar level. But if you threw Chuck Liddell in there, for example, this weekend in his prime against Sergey Pavlovich or Tom Aspinall or something like that, skill for skill now, Chuck could get absolutely murdered because just because the sport has evolved. He was phenomenal in his era, but the game moves on, and I think the thing for Anderson Silva is, I think if you still put a prime Anderson Silva in 10 years from now into the current crop that is in there, I still think he stands out as being one of the most skill for skill fighters in there. I don't think the style that Anderson has will ever age.
He was advanced for his era. Mm-hmm. He was like how people would fight today back then.
Yeah.
So just ages.
I mean, people talk about the comparison, don't they, with Izzy?
Yeah.
The people were making that comparison, and I know you mentioned him as in there, John, as for one of your favorite fighters, and whatever else. But for me, Izzy doesn't have a patch on Anderson Silva. The resume or accomplishments down the line might, go on to show that he was maybe a better, more successful champion, more defenses, X, Y, and Z. But for me, there's just something about Anderson Silva. The prime Anderson Silva was just devastating and was must-see TV.
Yeah.
Devastating is the word, because I think Izzy had me. I don't know how many defenses off the top of my head, 7 or 8, but there
They're
are
all
some close
forgettable.
ones. Some close ones. Silva, there was no competition. You knew
Mhm.
he was going to win. You want, whenever you tune in to watch a fight, you want to see a finish. Silva brought
I think
that
the
finish.
problem is as well, like I said, not that we're turning it into a Izzy and Anderson comparison podcast, but Izzy will piece his man up for 5 rounds, whereas Anderson would just get them out of there.
Get it done.
That was the big difference. If he felt he was levels above, he would just take them out as and when he wanted to, and that's what made him so exciting to watch as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Izzy's only had five title defenses. I've just looked it
5
up, so
title
it's
defenses. Yeah.
it's not even close. And really, you think about the only 2 of those really that stood out is the Paulo Costa one, because he finished him.
And Pereira.
If we'd not had the break,
wasn't it? Wasn't a defense.
If we'd not had the break, I was going to chuck CM Punk in as my number 1, just to watch your faces when I said it, or chuck Sean Strickland in or something like that. Greatest of all time.
Amazing.
Hey, talker of all time.
Still do it. Could still do it. He could still do it.
Also, if I could just mention, Silva had a record 16-fight winning streak.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And Usman came closest to 13. Like, that's
And Usman was on a tear. Usman was on a tear. I don't think Volk was that far off until he obviously lost to Makachev. Was that?
Yeah, something like
that. I
that.
don't think Volk would have been. Even still, he was at like maybe 10 or 11. Nowhere near bloody 16.
Well, this is the point. Like, we're talking about people who, in this current era, we consider as being dominant champions, and we're comparing them up against a guy that they're not even close to. So
exactly.
It just shows where Anderson sits. Yeah.
That's a great shout. Right. To wrap us up, I'm going to throw out some curveballs for you, gents. So the first one, if you could go back to any UFC era, what era would you go back to as a fan? Obviously. Anyone want to kick us off with that one? Anyone got it on the tip of their tongue?
I got one. I'll be a little surprising. You guys might like it. I want to go to the era of Conor versus Aldo. Just to see the rise of Conor. I think the hype behind him. Well, I guess kind of a casual answer, but I think
it's a hell of an answer.
Well, what Conor brought to the UFC, all the Irish fans, I imagine UK was also behind him, was next level. I think just the rise, everybody's behind him. He was a shit talker. He backed it up, like Nathan was saying, and he was entertaining. So just to go back to that era, see the rise of that, and then everybody knew Conor's name. Like like we were talking about Silva, everybody knew when Silva was fighting. Everybody knew who Conor was. Even though he was fighting, when he was fighting, you just know Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor was in people's mouth.
The rise of Conor McGregor is like I said it earlier on this pod. For me, it's the most pivotal point of the UFC's history. And I'll be completely honest, I see Conor nowadays, and I just can't wait to see him get back in there and get smashed to bits by somebody, whether it was Chandler or Gaethje or whoever. That's just where I am with it now. That guy is gone. But
what if he wins? What if this guy wins?
When he's not got it in him. But Conor's, the rise of Conor McGregor was second to none. That era was phenomenal. But I would argue that maybe I don't think I'd want to go back, because there's been some great moments, but I actually think that we're in a real good point in the UFC's run to date, and I think we're seeing more skilled, more accomplished fighters coming through, and I think there's a greater appreciation as well for the likes of Islam, for example, who doesn't necessarily have the most fan-pleasing style as such. You watch your Gaethjes, you watch your Oliveras, you talk about Conor and Chandler and those guys, Poirier, they're all far more exciting to watch. That's why so many of us were such a fan of Volk and hoping that Volk would go up and beat Islam. But, we just saw what Islam did to Volk, and even the wrestlers in the UFC now are starting to become quite devastating as well in their own rights, whether it's ground and pound, whether it's just absolutely ragdolling somebody. I mean, even watching Hamzat that first round against Kamaru Usman, you could appreciate that first round a lot more. In the past, we may have looked at that round and gone, it's fucking boring. Whereas now we're like, oh my God, he's absolute, because you've got a greater appreciation of Kamaru's skill set, what he's good at. And then you're watching this happen in front of you and thinking, oh my God, this guy's an absolute animal. But it's just, then you see how the rest of the fight unfolds. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've said on previous pods, which, you know, John probably hasn't listened to, but I think that fight goes, if that's a 5-round fight, I think Kamaru gets him out of there. I think he gasses and that's where I think that one goes. But I just think we're in a great stage now. I think, you know, we're starting to see strikers come back into the fold a little bit more, because you've got strikers like, for example, Leon Edwards, who, you know, Leon's coming up against Colby, and I've said it to you, Taylor, before, but Leon Edwards will do whatever he wants with Colby. He'll absolutely piece Colby up. I don't think that fight is competitive whatsoever. And John might not maybe think whatever, but it's because we've seen more of Leon because we've kept an eye on him from a not a casual side, but from when you're following somebody from your own country, much like you would for the Canadian fighters, John, you pay much closer attention to a particular fight, which for us, we might see someone like you, Charles Jourdain, or somebody like that fighting on the card, and you might say, oh yeah, he beat do you know what I mean? And we have to kind of roll back, whereas we can look back on Leon's fights and we know exactly who it was, because it was a much bigger build-up for us to talk about, to review, to watch. And you know, we've watched Leon, and Leon's more than capable of handling any wrestling that comes his way. You know, Colby's not going to be able to just do what he wants, and Leon will absolutely light him up on the feet. But that's where the sport's evolving to now. Strikers are good at defensive takedowns. You know, actually defending the takedown and keeping the fight on the feet. They're also perfectly capable on the ground, and I think we're starting to see a much more rounded mixed martial artist as a whole than what we have seen before.
Nice, great
And
answer.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I hope he pieces up Colby, because I don't like Colby.
He will do. He will do. He's going to make he's going to make what Masvidal did to him in that restaurant look like a Christmas party.
Let's go. I definitely third that one. For my era, I'd love to. Honestly, I'd love to go back and live through the. I lived through it, but be interested in and have it on my radar is the UFC and Pride era, because I'd really love to see some of those names and just watch the back and forth. You know, I can imagine like the build up to the crossover that they did, just being out of this world and just blowing people's minds. And then some of the names that came over and all the rivalries that were going on at that time, and it was all still a little bit. You know, I like the idea of I do and I don't like the idea of, at that time there was one UFC every 6 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it might have been, because I think obviously the rarity of it does add something to it. But obviously I like having fights every weekend as well, so I'm not complaining either. But I just would have liked to have
spoiled right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I just would have liked to have gone through that era and properly follow it, because I do think at this stage now there's starting to be a couple jumping up. I do think the UFC does need a proper competitor. You know, the PFL got the backing and everything like that, but it's not at that level yet. Will it be? Who knows? But the UFC is such a behemoth now. I mean, you even look at it and how they just gobble up organizations into Fight Pass, and you just, you know, I think I would love to have seen it back in the Pride days and just have that mix, because Pride was obviously totally different as well to what the UFC had. So yeah, if I was to go back, that would be my little era to go back to. But I do like Nathan. I like your shout as well. And the Conor one was on my mind as well. I was to and fro because that's just ridiculous what Conor did.
Yeah, don't wish for too much competition at the highest level, Taylor, because that's what we have in boxing, and that's why none of the best fighters fight the best fighters, because they're all at different promotions and different organizations and fighting for different belts. And
this is very true.
Let's keep it as it is. The UFC is the premier of this sport, and the best fight the best in that place.
This is very true. So
and the best fight the best.
And the best fight the best, right? So next little curveball, looking more to the future now. So we've looked back plenty. If you could make one change to the UFC, what change would that be and why? I will kick it off while you guys have a little think. For me, I would love to see a tournament format at some point. I would love to see, for example, in the lightweight division, maybe not last year, maybe around about the year before, around about when Khabib was just about coming up, and you had quite a few of them in there. I mean, it's been like that the last couple of years anyway, right? Since Khabib went off, and you have Dustin, Justin, Makachev, Hooker when he was up there, and all those other guys. McGregor when he was still relevant, Chandler in the mix as well. I'd love to just say, yeah, you know what, we're going to do.
Hooker was there as well.
Hooker, we're going to do these guys on one night, competition style, winner takes all at the end of the night. That's a change. Look, it's really, really difficult to do, but we're looking at a perfect world. We're speculating here, so that's the change I would love to see. And I think it would just be that kind of thing would be incredible, that I think the UFC needs to do. So anybody want to jump in with what their suggestion would be? What would they like to see?
Nathan, you got one?
Not yet. I mean, I have.
Mine's a little ridiculous, but I think it's no USADA, no drug testing. I think, but no weight cuts either.
Okay, no USADA, no weight cut.
Yeah, people fighting at their natural weight, just same weight. Maybe not have like such big discrepancy in weight divisions, but like if you walk around at 170, fight 170. Don't fight on a duplicit, and see your natural big self fight against another big man like who's same weight built as you.
Plus the steroids.
Maybe a little bit of USADA, but I meant like no weight classes type of way. So like, you don't have to cut weight. You don't want to deplete yourself 24 hours before, and just take all the time to recover.
I mean, they're wasting all that time and money on Power Slap, right? Well, according to David, they're not wasting it. So why would you not do a separate UFC for just the steroids and just the PEDs, right? Surely that's better than Power Slap anyway.
Because remember Alistair versus Brock Lesnar? Like that was
Uberim.
Uberim and Juiced Brock. Everybody was watching that. So
because Mark Hunt recently lost his case, didn't he? Against the UFC for the Brock Lesnar fight, right?
That he fought, was it Overeem that it was on not tested, it was on roids, and but I would watch that still. So
I would watch the hell out of that. Yeah. That'd be ridiculous.
That's just my first thought after. That's my first thought after that curve question.
But imagine like a juiced up Max Holloway or Justin Gaethje fighting each other. It would just never end.
For the BMF.
Yeah, for the BMF, it would just keep going. It would just never end. That's a great shout. Right, and Nathan.
JMF, the juiciest motherfucker.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. What have you got for us, Ralph?
I'm gonna move on from the open steroids and everything. I thought the weight cut one was a good one. I think I don't necessarily think fighting at the weight that you walk around at, just because I think that kind of does take away a bit of a competitive edge, and I think you'll start to see quite sloppy fighters. A bit, everyone will be walking around like a bit like a Kevin Gastelum. So I think what we need to see is just a reduction in the percentage of how much weight you can cut. If you walk around at 185, for example, the lowest you should be able to fight at is maybe 10 pounds below that. You fight at 175. That's your cut. I don't want to see people cutting 30 pounds and stupid things like that, because it's detrimental. And these guys, I know they're trying to gain an advantage, but they're depleting themselves. All we ever see is guys stepping up in weight and saying, "I feel great. I feel stronger. I feel fitter. I feel faster. And you think, well, what are you doing?
Like no shit.
What? Like, obviously that was going to be the outcome, but they still continue to try and cut weight. We were talking negatively about Colby before, but one thing I will say for Colby is that Colby doesn't. He's openly said he could cut down to lightweight. Yeah. He says he can make the cut. He can get down there, but he doesn't believe in that. Maybe there's an element of he doesn't want to do that, but I also think that he's generally more comfortable at the weight. He's a little bit undersized. He's not quite as big as, when you see him in there with Usman, for example, he's nowhere near the size Imagine what he looked like in there against a Hamzat or something like that. It would be absolutely towering, massive in stature in comparison, but he fights at his natural weight. So I think that's a big one. But just to chuck a couple of little different things in, number one would be the scoring system. I know we've touched on it a bunch, Taylor. But for me, when we're talking about judging these rounds, I think to have a very close round where you cannot decipher the winner being scored a 10-9 and saying, we look at Max and Volk, for example, you go, it's a pretty even round, maybe Volk, 10-9. And then you watch the next round and Volk wins it comfortably, but he just doesn't do any like crazy damage or anything like that. But you're quite confident the fact that he's then won that round. It's 10-9. Scoring those two rounds the same for me is just not right. I mean, we've had a number of conversations, Taylor, where I've said, for me, that should be, we're looking at 10-8 rounds where someone's been absolutely smashed to bits. It's a 10, make it a 10-7. Make 10-8 a clear round. Make 10-9 a very close round that you just favour or just edge to one fighter. Because what we're doing is we're judging it too much as a competition. We're not judging it as a fight. If they're in there for 15 minutes and somebody knocks the fucking life out of somebody for 5, I'm not talking like Hamzat Usman, I'm talking about like significant, damage, real busting up and absolutely smashing to bits. If you beat the shit out of them for 5 minutes and then they just edge you over the next 10 minutes and they win the fight and you're there and everything's hanging off and you're all bust to pieces and you've not won the fight, you've won the competition. And I'd like to see it scored a little bit more to, if you win the fight, you win the fight, not if you edge it out on points. So that would be one for me. One other thing I'd like to see the UFC do a little bit more is the walkouts and everything. I think they're missing a little bit of a step in the current market. I think I look. One of the things I love about the UFC coming over from boxing is the pace that we do. It's fight, then it's another fight, then it's another fight. It just keeps you entertained. You don't get up, you don't leave, you don't pop out to the shop and then come back with a few more beers. You make sure you've got them all before the fights kick off. Do you know what I mean? That's what you do. But there's nothing wrong with allowing a little bit of something, even if it's just for the main card. Tick all the prelims over once you get into the main card, or even if you just did the co-main and the main, give these guys a bit of a walkout, let them have their own song, their own theme, their own moment. Because, coming from the world of boxing, there's so many fighters that have walked out and they've got a particular song that's attached to them or a particular ring walk. We've seen Prince Naseem Hamed, for example, come out, carried on the throne and everything else in the leopard print stuff. And we've got, Chris Eubank Senior doing his flips over the ropes. And it's just, it gets you a little bit more relatable to that particular person. I mean, John was talking about Izzy earlier on, and I'll be honest, I'm not Izzy's biggest fan. But, when he came out, I think he had the Linkin Park song or something like that, and he had all the dancers, and he was fucking flipping over and doing all this. And it was cool as shit. Yeah. I was watching that thinking, this is fucking brilliant.
And I'd like
to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a bit more of that.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I'll throw another one in. And then, John, maybe you got time for one more if you do have one. For me, I want to see all 5 and above contender fights, 5 rounds. Simple as that. So if you're ranked 1 to 5, you go 5 rounds. John, any others before we wrap up?
I actually would agree with Nathan. I would change the judging criteria. Something is extremely off. Even like what you suggested, if like it was super close, 10-9, and it's one-sided 10-8. I feel like we'll get a lot of draws like that if it's 3 rounders. Because if somebody could just dominate round 1, 10-8, and then the next person just come back slightly, win the next 2 rounds, we'll get some 29-29s.
There's nothing wrong with that either. Nothing wrong with that.
But something, because judging is so inconsistent. I feel like you guys probably talked about it so many times already. And we all talk about it. Twitter's going crazy. The commentators, reporters. The judging has to change. It has to be uniquely to MMA because right now it's really boxing point system. They need to change it to MMA style. Something to take consideration, like I don't know what it has to be. Something, it doesn't have to be the 10-9s anymore. It has to be something else, like 1 point for a takedown, 1 point for this, something like that. Just to show clear winner, even in a close fight. Yeah, maybe more draws.
But if a basketball game can be a draw, then a fight can be a draw. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, basketball.
Nathan,
I think
last
it-
games
words.
can be. I don't think
Yeah, I
basketball
mean-
games can be drawn, at least in America here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you're looking at you mentioned a fun one with the rounds and whatnot there. You know, I think when you've got a competitive knock between, I think I did see one. I can't remember. There's an upcoming fight the next before the year's out or something where it might
Dan
be one
Hooker,
of the
Bobby
fights.
Green.
Yeah, going the
Yeah,
5
the
rounds.
co-main for Austin. Yeah.
You know, if it's a fun fight, make it 5 rounds. Give us
Yeah.
a little bit more. You know, if it's a co-main event, doesn't need to have a title attached or any major implications or anything. But yeah, I mean, my parting words are this. Potan becomes the light heavyweight champion of the world this weekend, and Tom Aspinall sets the world on fire once more and absolutely smashes Sergey Pavlovich to bits.
Yeah.
Let's
I
go.
agree with
And you
Aspinall.
I
just
think.
Disagree with Pereira.
three Aspinalls, and you've just put the pressure on me to get this out before the event. Cheers, Nathan.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Pressure's on.
Gents, it's been an absolute pleasure.
You'll make me look like a genius afterwards, that's all, mate.
You do that yourself, man, to be honest. It's been an absolute pleasure, guys, reviewing the last 30 years of the UFC. Happy birthday to the UFC over the weekend. I hope you all enjoy the fights. Nathan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. The Octagon Oracle on YouTube.
No worries, mate.
And Jonathan, also, thank you very much for joining us all the way over there in Canada.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for being here. Like, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Drop us a comment. Let us know your top 5s, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.